Welcome to Buckeyes Tomorrow Morning for Monday, April 7th. I'm your host, Tom Orr. The Texas game in 145 days, the game against Michigan in 236 days. If you're planning your next event, make it unforgettable with Grateful Griddle, Columbus's favorite food truck, serving up smash burgers, gourmet sandwiches, and good vibes. Book your catering today at GratefulGriddleOH.com. Spring game coming up on Saturday, and we will have a week filled with football content. Forecast for Saturday looking pretty good. Looks like it's going to be probably sunny and in the 50s, so get your tickets if you have not already done that at OhioStateBuckeyes.com. We will have full coverage of the spring game and all the excitement around that all week long at BuckeyeHuddle.com and, of course, here on the Buckeyes Morning feed. However, today we're going to be taking a little bit of a twist. We're going to be talking a little basketball. There's been a bunch of news, and it's just kind of been like, yeah, we need to do a show about basketball because there's been a lot to talk about over the last week or so as the Buckeyes have added a couple players to the portal. Several key players have announced that they're returning, which does constitute news these days. Something else that constitutes news when Tony Gerdeman of BuckeyeHuddle.com joins me. Tony, welcome. The portal officially opened for business on Monday, March 24th. Closes on Tuesday, April 22nd. So we are still just about halfway through the portal season. So nothing's like officially in stone yet, but it feels like we're starting to get at least some sense for what the 2025-2026 Ohio State men's basketball team might look like.
Yeah, and I think the key is that you're going to ideally and likely be returning your top three scorers in Bruce Thornton, Devin Royal, and John Mobley, and then you add to that through the portal, through recruiting, and through development. So there should be some familiar faces, and really the crux of the squad that Jake Diebler needed to bring back. It looks like he's going to be able to do that.
Yeah, that was certainly a team that had some questions and was certainly missing a few pieces last year. But the three guys you mentioned, Bruce Thornton, John Mobley, and Devin Royal, those guys were three solid players for the Buckeyes all season long. And three guys where it was like, boy, if they just had a couple other complementary pieces to those three, you'd potentially have a pretty good basketball team. Getting all three of those guys back, I think, very, very important. I think there was a little bit of a concern that Bruce Thornton for his final year might be looking around a little bit, but sounds like he's going to be back. And John Mobley coming back for his second year and Devin Royal for his third year. You know, there are still plenty of pieces around them where there's a little bit of a question mark, guys who have not announced they're coming back who potentially could. But just the three of them, that just feels like a very solid foundation that then you're just looking to add a few pieces around those guys. But that's a pretty good start of a basketball team.
Yeah, you'll take that backcourt, that starting backcourt, and then Devin Royal is going to be one of the top front court players in the Big Ten. Can score inside, can score outside, is a rebounder as well. And the more minutes he gets, the better. Now, can they do what they need to do defensively? I mean, sometimes that's a question mark. But you'll take those three and then add to them. And if Sean Stewart returns and he's a year better in the post, I think that's one of the things that they're missing. I think they expected more from Sean Stewart and Aaron Bradshaw last year than they got, grabbing those two big guys out of the portal. Bradshaw, we know, is off back into the portal. Sean Stewart, if he's back, he provides some defense and some rebounding. Can they get some scoring, though? If they can get a scoring threat in the paint, and maybe we could talk about that here in a bit, that would then allow John Mobley and Bruce Thornton not to have to force so much outside. If they could get some more open looks, because when John Mobley gets an open look, he's very, very good. When he has to create on his own and force some things, his percentage drops, and that's the same with any guard who is looking to score. So if they can just get somebody that can score in the paint and bring the defense a little, pack it in a little bit closer so that they have some freedom of movement and freedom of shot selection, then maybe that will help everybody. But, and they did go into the portal for a big guy.
They did, and that big guy is Christoph Tilly. He is definitely a big man. He's not someone who's just going to camp down in the paint, though. He's someone who, one of those guys who can just sort of shoot from even outside, which does a lot for you and potentially brings some different, a different dynamic to the offense. But it also feels like that's a really good addition, but also, Sean Stewart has neither announced that he's staying nor that he's going. So he's sort of in limbo right now, which I guess the default assumption is that you're staying, I guess. But, it still, Christoph Tilly feels like He's a really interesting addition to the team and probably brings a different dynamic than they had last year in terms of big men and what they can do scoring wise. But I don't know that he solves all of the issues down in the paint.
Yeah, I would agree with that. I think maybe offensively, he's more of what Aaron Bradshaw thinks he is, but isn't yet, because he, like you said, 12 and a half points a game last year, would take 1 or 2 threes a game. And, he shot like 30% from three. So he's got range, he's got touch, but he's like a big European basketball player, basically. And I think when you say that, a lot of people kind of have a pretty good understanding of what that means. It also means, at 7 foot, 225, 230 pounds, only 4.9 rebounds per game last year as a junior. And so you'd like to see that higher. And that's what kind of scoring in the paint can he do? He's, like I said, he's got some touch, but he's going to get pushed around in the Big Ten just like anybody. And will there be any calls while that is happening? Probably not. So you're going to have to learn to deal with that. But he's coming over from Santa Clara, West Coast Conference. That's a basketball conference. That's a legitimate place. So he's got some experience. He's 2-year starter there. And so now he's going to be able to, we'll see what he can do. He was all conference player, I believe, this past year at Santa Clara. But I do wonder, does this solve what they're looking for in terms of low post scoring? I don't know. It's better than it was, though. I'll say that.
Yeah, it feels like a step forward, but not maybe potentially like solved problem completely. And, I think that's something you could say about the other guy they've brought in the portal, and that's Gabe Cupps. He's a point guard originally from the state of Ohio, then went to play his first couple of years at Indiana, missed most of last year with a knee injury. So he's now an addition, and he's someone who, you're not adding Gabe Cupps and thinking this is someone who's going to come in and be a starter. This is someone who's probably going to come in and be a little bit more of a complementary player for them, but you're bringing in someone who then has a couple of years of Big Ten experience and is used to what it means to play in the Big Ten officiating and all.
Yeah, and he could probably do, Quest Glover played a lot of minutes once Michi Johnson left the team. So there are minutes to be had for a third guard, and they'll play 3 guards at times. And we'll see what happens with Tayson Chapman as well in his future. But he does have that experience. It was interesting. As a true freshman, he averaged 3.4 rebounds per game, which is, I just mentioned that Christoph Tilly, 4.9 as a junior. So Cupps is, he's one of those scrappers, but he can shoot. He can get to the basket. He was, I think he was Mr. Basketball in Ohio, or he and Malachi Branham, I think, were maybe mixing it up there or at some point. But he comes from a good program at Centerville and played quite a bit. Started, I think, 22 games as a true freshman at Indiana. So this is somebody that is got experience, and that's something that the Buckeyes are looking for.
All right, and I just did some quick Googling while you were talking. Gabe Cupps was, in fact, Mr. Basketball in Ohio. So there you go. You have a former Mr. Basketball winner joining the Buckeyes there. Now, they're also losing some key pieces. Micah Parrish was the only one of the top 4 scorers who is leaving. He graduated. They also, as you mentioned earlier, Aaron Bradshaw hits the portal, Michi Johnson hits the portal, Aaron Mahaffey hits the portal, Austin Parks hits the portal. So those are 3 big guys, plus Michi Johnson, who are all headed out the door. And then you have, as you mentioned, some other guys who are kind of in the middle in terms of, are they what's the status of Tayson Chapman, guys like that. So you got that. But just, based on what we know right now about this team, what else do they need? If they are going portal shopping and there's another couple weeks that the portal's open before, that guys could potentially put their names in, and Lord knows there are plenty of people in the portal right now. It's thousands, literally thousands of players in the portal right now. I think it was 3 times the number that had been in this time last year. So it is kind of going crazy in college basketball right now. But just position-wise, I don't even need specific names, but just position-wise, what's on the shopping list for the Buckeyes as they look to build out their roster for the upcoming season?
Yeah, and I think some of this is dependent on Sean Stewart. And I know as we're recording this, before you even get it uploaded, news will break. So we'll be contradicting whatever we've said here. But one of the interesting things, you lose Micah Parrish, and that's 13, 14 points a game on that wing. And he came up big in some certain circumstances over the course of the season. And, I know Devin Royal is a forward, but sometimes he's a stretch 4. He's a big 3. whereas Parrish could also play the 2. And so I think somebody in that mold of a Mike Parrish, and maybe that's Colin White this year or this next year, as a sophomore. And, he got a little bit of experience. He was playing more and more as the season went on. So maybe he can step in and do some of that. I know we've been talking about a big man, but, I'd say a scoring wing. And if you can get somebody that can play in the paint, and the thing is, it's like looking for a left tackle in football in the portal. Like, well, if they could just get, a big that can score and a guy on a wing that's tough to stop. But yeah, that's everybody's plan. And there are plenty of schools out there, more schools out there that will pay for that in college basketball than there are in college football.
Well, we will see how the Buckeyes wrap up that spring portal season in basketball, and we'll also be following what will probably be a lively spring portal session in football. That'll start in just a week or so after the Buckeyes wrap up spring practice. I believe the spring portal window opens April 20th or thereabouts. So there'll be plenty of football talk, plenty of basketball talk, and much, much more. Spring game coming up on Saturday for the Buckeyes for football. The White House visit on Monday following that. And there's going to be plenty to talk about there. And then, of course, all that portal drama and all that fun. That's all coming up. Plus, potentially a very busy time in recruiting as well. I told you that there was, on yesterday's show, that there was a new commitment for the Buckeyes in football. Mark and Tony took care of that one on Friday for you in the Buckeye Weekly feed. Plenty more coming on the recruiting front as the Buckeyes are hosting a ton of visitors right now. Lots to talk about in recruiting, lots to talk about with the team, lots to talk about in the transfer portal. You can talk about it all with us at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That's where Tony, Kevin, and I cover the team. Mark covers recruiting. We got our whole team of X's and O's gurus there as well, all to make you a smarter football fan, all at BuckeyeHuddle.com. That'll do it for today. Thank you guys all for joining us. Have a great day. We'll talk to you tomorrow.